Hello and welcome to CTOs at Work podcast series. In this podcast series, we explore the stories and insight of successful tech leaders from all around the world. And today, we are thrilled to have Dr. Jeremy Murray from the United Kingdom as our guest. Dr. Jeremy is an experienced CTO and technical leader with a strong background in semiconductor, IoT, software engineering, and product development. He has a proven track record of building high performing technical teams and delivered large scale innovative scalable solution for business for many different kind of businesses. And he has worked with companies like Texas Instrument, Analog Devices, and so many others internationally. And currently Jeremy serves as the co-founder and CTO at Aceso Analytics, and he also recently founded another product within Aceso umbrella, which is a Stack8s.ai, where he oversees and provides the technology leadership for building cutting edge technologies for Kubernetes and works closely with cross functional teams to drive business growth. Dr. Jeremy has three patents and 12 journal paper on his name, and he also, apart from all the technical and academic things, he also enjoy doing campaigning, badminton, and cricket. And we are excited to hear from Jeremy today about his experience as a tech leader and his insight on how to build a successful tech products and teams. So very warm welcome, Jeremy. Thank you so much for having on our show.
No, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's very nice to see what you're doing, and yeah, it's good to be part of your podcasts. Yeah, thank you.
It's absolutely our honor, Jeremy, to have you here on the podcast and learn from you. So, Jeremy, interestingly, you do so many different things. You play technology leadership role, you build products, and that's also in a that kind of complicated space like healthcare, and Kubernetes is also now the completely technology driven and technology first organization. So, what was your career journey and how you reached up to this stage, and what is your vision for SSO
Yeah,
analytics and Stack Ideas?
right. I think let's start with the first half of the question. I think uh, as everyone knows, you have different ambitions, different plans set out when you start, and things go different ways. So no, the road is never just straight. So it always takes you through windings, and you end up in in something you never expected. So my journey is very similar. So I have always been, right from my childhood, I've been interested in engineering and electronics. And yeah, I mean, I remember, disassembling all my toys and putting them back together. That was the first thing I used to do on a brand new toy. I used to disassemble it and then put it back together. And my parents were like, no, this is something, you should not do. But then I started doing some things with electronics, opening up radios and then putting those together, TVs, and so electronics was something very, close to me, and I really found it very fascinating to an extent that one day I put a nail in, and I was very small. I put a nail inside the mains switch, and I turned it on, and I got a very bad shock. So some people say like that was your point where you decided like electronics is what I'm going to study. But yeah, I was a bit, daft when I was small and doing stupid things. But anyway, so my journey started when I took up engineering subjects in my college, and then ended up going to Wales, North Wales, and studied my electronics degree there. And that was kind of the first experience of real electronics. And people who study electrical engineering might think that, oh, electronics and electrical are very same, but they're absolutely different. Electrical engineering is more like bigger scale electrical power stations, grids, and all those. But electronics is more semiconductor, very tiny nanoscale stuff. So that was a very kind of fascinating course in Wales, and then that kind of paved my way into engineering. Um, Soon after I graduated there, I got into Edinburgh University for a PhD degree. And that was actually a degree in chemistry. It was more like electrochemistry, but the topic was creating microinductors for Texas Instruments, and that involved a lot of work in laboratories, clean room, and fabrication on silicon, and a lot of characterization, etc. We did do a little bit of machine learning back then. This was in 2010. Machine learning was not the term was not used, but instead it was just mathematical equations and things like those. So we did a lot of pattern recognition there, and then after that, my after the PhD degree at Edinburgh University, I worked for a company there called Piraeus, and it was kind of my first experience into the semiconductor world as an employee, and I soon moved into the application side of things. So it was very interesting because there we were building small spectrometers for doing blood analysis, for milk analysis, and then I was involved in making the sensors initially in the laboratory testing and all them. But then I moved into a team more about the application side. Like, okay, you make sensors, but then what do you do with it, right? A sensor can be
Hmm.
state of the
Right.
art. A
Yeah.
camera chip, like right now, can be state of the art. But if you don't know its applications, then it can be quite a useless thing, right? So I got involved into the application development of the spectrometers for doing blood analysis, and that's when I got introduced to machine learning, and it was still very basic at that time. And then I found it quite interesting that not just making senses, but how do you use them in the industry is more more exciting. Um, and then I think after working there several years, 6 years, I think I met the co-founder of Aceso, Harold, while I was finishing my MBA in Edinburgh as well. And that's where when things clicked and changed. We basically had ideas about a startup together. Again, using IoT sensors, but more for healthcare purposes. And we started off with this journey together to use IoT sensors for maybe coming up with solutions of identifying dementia at an earlier age, but using simple technologies and cheaper solutions. And then moving on, developing our own in-house analytics. We discovered that lots of there are lots of cloud providers that are there, but vendor lock-in is real. Like when you get into a vendor, you get locked in, prices go up. And then we had to come up with our own solution. And Stack ATS was a very exciting project, which was internal before. Then we put a nice wrapper around it, and now we are creating it as a product for others to use and enjoy. So yeah, quite exciting.
Ah, that's quite a fascinating journey, right? So instead of growing up in your corporate ladders, you pick up a path of entrepreneurship and combine your technology skills together.
Yes, I
So
mean
what was
that's been very exciting. Yes.
yeah? So what was the trigger for that? For you to get into this entrepreneurship journey, taking your technology skills.
It's something. It's not like something that happens overnight, and I think for some it may do, but for me it wasn't like that. It's a very difficult. It's a very difficult choice to make when you are switching from your a job, and then switching to being an entrepreneur, having your own startup, and being involved in the decisions of the company, and then employing people. I think it was gradual. It wasn't, like I said, overnight. It was that moment. Obviously, there's a phase when you try, and you have to be prepared that if you fail, you should move on. I mean, there's so many organizations that keep trying something, and it's like 15 years gone past and they're still trying, So I think that mindset that, okay, we're going to build something that's going to solve a problem. If a problem does not exist, there's no point of a product. So there was a problem that we tried to fix with a solution, and that worked. And we are happy that we can continue that journey. And I think we're just expanding into a different phase in that journey right now.
Oh, that's quite interesting. So, for our audience to to help them better understand what is SSO analytics and what is a stack 8S and what is the relationship between both?
Very, very good question. It does confuse a few people, but so the word Aceso is a Greek goddess of the healing process. So it's a very healthcare word. If you check out Aceso, there'll be lots of other organizations that are under the healthcare umbrella come in the word Aceso, right? So when Aceso Analytics was founded, our aim was to use IoT technologies to identify patterns of the daily activities of elderly people. Right, giving you an example, an elderly person usually has a routine when they wake up in the morning, and they would go to get a newspaper, read a newspaper, have a cup of tea, go out for a walk, come back, have some food. So they have these routines, the sleeping patterns, going to the toilet, for example. But there are cases when those routines start deviating. Things like going to the toilet more often, not eating too well, not going for walks, and that can be an indicator of something wrong. And that individual people cannot; those individuals sometimes don't identify that as an issue. But if we can use IoT sensors to non-intrusively measure or check out on the activities of these elderly, we can get an insight a bit more in a bit more granularity of what their activities are, and if they're deviating, then we should be able to let the healthcare providers to come in and maybe see if they can, make it right. So the more kind of in Acesso Analytics, we started off with off-the-shelf IoT sensors, like motion sensors and all. But the main sensor that we have an IP in is the sound analytics. So with sound on the edge, we can identify a lot more. And when I say on the edge, we have to do it on the edge without sending sound to the cloud, because otherwise that's intrusive, right? So that was very niche, and we're kind of focusing a lot of finding ways to identify activities such as in the toilet, if somebody's taking a shower, if somebody's shouting out for help, if they're flushing the toilet, water, if they're drinking water, coughing, sneezing, snoring, all these sounds can give you a bit more insight on the health of a person, of an individual. And we're trying to do that completely non-intrusively, and that's what our kind of IP is right now in Acesso Analytics. And it's not just for healthcare. We have also identified there are lots of other critical infrastructure markets where the same sensing technology can be applied, like for identifying when equipment fails in hospitals, or if an equipment fails, air conditioners is not working in a big data center, for example. So the same kind of sensing technologies goes there. Now, your question, other part of the question about Stack ATS. So at the moment, Stack ATS is part of Acesso because we built it in-house. And the whole point was that we identified that with this IoT infrastructure that we have, we need a place to manage it. And also we need analytics behind all the data we're collecting. We need dashboards, we need databases. And in the healthcare sector, they sometimes like to keep things very private, right? And to have that, there was not many platforms out there where you could deploy things on-prem or on the cloud, or both, or have a hybrid situation. So stack it is something we develop, meaning stack it is like building your stacks on K8s, which is Kubernetes, and everything we do internally is all container based. And Kubernetes is a great tool to orchestrate all of that, and gives you these building blocks for creating an environment where you can deploy things either on the cloud or hybrid. And that's the product that we're very excited to introduce very soon.
Wow, that's quite interesting, right? And on the SSO analytics side, as you mentioned about users of voice technology, right? The speech analytics, you are driving such an interesting use case. That's something really amazing. I think I heard for the very first time such kind of things are happening through noise through on the healthcare side. And
Yes.
interestingly, the same technology is getting applied onto all other initiatives, on uh, data centers and all that typical critical infrastructure. That's really, really amazing. So when we talk about healthcare these days, whenever we talk about healthcare, it comes like naturally as a wearable devices in everybody's mind. Like, okay,
Yes.
wearable devices I can do. So what do you see? The value add with wearable devices versus the speech analytics technology which you
I
play.
mean, yeah, well, good question. I mean, you've seen that Apple watches and all are coming in, and there's lots of companies making really cheap smart watches nowadays, and that can do a lot. It can even do heart rate and oxygen level, blood oxygen. I mean, it's endless now. But they can also do sound. However, the main problem is that these watches are again, need charging, and they if they're going to be identify if they're going to be checking in on a lot of vitals of the person, the battery life is not going to be that long, and that can be a problem for the elderly folks, because charging something, it can be quite monotonous. And also, and when you think about people with dementia, they will forget to either charge, or they will even forget where they kept it, right? So having something on the body, in some cases, there are wearables that you can just put around your, like a necklace, that has a button, SOS button, and maybe it has like a GPS on it. And usually battery life on those is, a few years, if not 10 years. But they have like an SOS button for somebody to falls or something to press. Those are quite popular. But then again, when somebody's taking a shower, or if they are in the bed, they can get strangled. I mean, there's lots of things that have happened in the past, where now now the technologies are, we are rethinking of other ways, which we can non-intrusively try to identify the activities, but without any variables. That was the kind of motivation.
Oh wow, that's quite interesting. That's quite insightful. Yeah. Yeah, wearable devices comes with all sort of headaches in terms of its management. Yeah, the elderly people find themselves difficult to manage themselves, and we expect them to manage their devices.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite interesting. Yeah. Now coming on to Stack 8s, this is amazing. I think it seems like the journey how Amazon has traversed initially, right? Amazon has their own infrastructure to support their e-commerce website, and then they have expanded later on as a full-blown Amazon web service now,
Mm.
which world knows. It seems like are moving in that directions to take Stack it into that. Now, in that space, Jeremy, I see um, Azure has their own Kubernetes offering. Google has DigitalOcean, and many other provider has. So, how do you see them as your? Do you see them as your competitor? Do you see them as your synergical partner, or how do you see them?
We don't see them as competition. We definitely are partnering with them. I mean, you cannot. It's simple. In simple terms, you cannot compete with Amazon, or Google, or Azure for what they've built. But the kind of motivation is that. Uh, we everything we are doing is on kind of vanilla Kubernetes. It's like out of the box Kubernetes, and we then connect to nodes that we can deploy with either in your subscription or our own subscription in Azure or GCP or in Amazon AWS. But the platform Stackitus will be able to manage those nodes independently. And with that, having said that in mind, this is like kind of the hybrid cloud situation where having a node in one node in Azure in say New Jersey, and then having another node in Amazon in India, and then having another Kubernetes node, a third node, where you have data, for example, on-prem in a bank or in a hospital, is something that has not been achieved on commercial products like of good caliber yet. So that's our motivation. Like, can you achieve that? And what kind of VPCs do you need? What kind of the networking fast data transfer from A to B you need? And also address something else. It's address sustainability, which is something I think cloud providers are now talking about. And we also see a lot of data centers coming up and claiming to be running on renewables or being 100% sustainable. And there are lots of kind of caveats in there. But what we're trying to do is making the audience aware that billions are being spent on idle cloud. There's a lot of cloud that virtual machines that you use or bare metal machines that part of it is being used for your application, but a big part is just idle, right? And how can we cleverly utilize, compute so that we utilize compute so that it is so that we are using compute in, for example, in places where the demand of electricity is low, usually in the nighttime, and then switching workload, GPU workload to those places, and then in the morning, switching it to another location where your continuous inferencing or your model generation could happen, keeping in mind that sustainability is of compute is very important and should be thought about. So we're trying to bring in that awareness. And I think, in summary, we are working with the big cloud providers, and not just the three you name, but many more. And you will find the list on the website as well. And yeah, we have drivers so that Stackitus can communicate with any of these cloud providers and spin up nodes that it needs for the Kubernetes cluster.
Interesting, very interesting. So I think there are very interesting strategic, takeaways, on this piece of conversation. As one, you build your product which you initially consumed in your own product, and then you made them that as a product offering, right? That's something I think in anybody in technology leadership role, whether from the namesake, the CTO role or VP engineering, head of technology, anything, should consider that strategic lenses in mind, that how you can best utilize that. And definitely the partnership approach which you mentioned, that's I think is also very interesting, to for a CTO role to consider that the strategic mindset along with the technology what they are building. That's a great examples of learning you shared. Amazing. And this leads to a good segue of your thoughts on CTO role. So what do you think, Jeremy, in current state of time, right? As the CTO role is becoming, more demanding, more confusing as well. Many companies have their own expectation, and that become more confusing, right? So what do you think in this current situation? What is the ideal role of CTO?
Right. I think with my experience so far, what I'll say is that if you're a CTO of a startup, then you have to be ready to wear lots of hats, right? Different hats, because uh, I was involved hands-on. I still am in the in the development of the products, and doing analytics, machine learning models, analyzing data, doing all of that quite hands on, and then and then switching from being hands on to delegating tasks and trusting your team. That's something very difficult to come by, because if you have built something with your own hands, then getting somebody else to continue building that wall, or that kind of the infrastructure is slightly challenging. And I think I've kind of learned to delegate tasks, and then move more onto the overall roadmap of the company in driving the technology of where we see ourselves in 6 months or 2 years or 5 years. I think that insight is very important to get. So I think in terms of me being the CTO, I have what I've identified is that the main assets of the company is not the products that you build. It's not a patent on something. It's not, the hardware that you build or sell. It's the people, right? The main asset is each and every employee in the company, because uh, together you build something, right? With one person, not being able to contribute because they're not enthusiastic in something, can bring a whole project down. So the main asset, I think, in our team, which I identified, is that are the people in Aceso, and this has been, it's a great journey with each and every one of them, and I'm quite proud of each one of them. So to help us, reach great heights together.
That's quite interesting. So, how do you approach hiring and build a strong technical team?
Yeah. So obviously, with a startup, the funds are always tight with everything, and you're trying to get the best in a field. I think with hiring, it has to be. It's very competitive. Hiring anybody in the company in terms of interviews and the steps that are involved in screening. So we are very diverse and an open team, as you know from the website. I think you can see quite a lot, but we take. I personally would take a lot of time in finding the right people for the company, because if you find people, if you find such people, then the time it takes to achieve your goals is much faster, and you may also think about you may also come across points which you've not thought before. So I think the hiring process in Aceso, personally for me, when I hire individuals in the team like data scientists or front end developers, I think what I look into is the problem solving skills, and how they can think out of the box. Because if they can, then it doesn't matter how technically good you are at building something or in coding, for example. But if you have problem solving skills, I think that takes you much further. Then anybody can go to Stack Overflow and get good examples of code. Anybody can do that nowadays, right? But you need to know how to approach and solve a problem first. So when I'm interviewing, I'm not really looking at the coding skills of anybody, but more like how they can approach, solving a certain problem. Yeah.
Oh, that's quite interesting. And while talking about your team and your problem, problem solving approach you look for, this leads to a good segue of understanding as you're building a stack a test product which is highly technical in nature, right? So how do you generate what features I need to build, right? Is it like you have a business development practice and that usually is not require a business development practice because it's a very heavy tech centric product? So how do you do that to, and what is your recommendation if somebody is building such kind of products
Yeah.
to see, what to be built at the stage one and how we can continue keeping the roadmap up and live?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. There's a few ways to answer that. I think the best way would be to obviously, if there is a product that you're thinking to build, which is technical, uh, and you know that you're going to be a lot of time and effort and money required to invest in building something like that, there must be a good reason for it. It must be really there to solve a problem. In our case, obviously, we had internal, that issue, and we kind of solved it with this tool. And we've seen lots of organizations in the same place, and we're trying to push it there now. But and I think identifying that there are lots of open source tools already out there that you can use as building blocks to
Hmm.
create your end product, and thinking of bootstrapping it, because if you don't think of bootstrapping something, and what is bootstrapping is meaning quickly bringing a few technologies together and creating a product using agile technologies, which I think most of the tech firms use nowadays. But bootstrapping is important. If you don't do that, then if you're really thinking of building a 100% working product, you will never reach that. It'll be very difficult to do
Mhm.
that. So lots of times you will see examples of Uber as an app, or in mobile phones, for example. Tech companies are spending a lot of money to launch their next mobile phone. Every Samsung wants to be ahead of Apple, and vice versa. And you will usually see that when the new phone is launched, they do it very quickly. It has to be a year before they launch a new one. But then you get a lot of software updates in the first few weeks, because they know it's not perfect, but it has to be in the market. If it's not in the market, you've kind of the train is gone, So you have to bootstrap something, put it out there, and then you have revisions. Because it's software, it's easier to do that. When it's hardware,
Hmm.
like an IoT and all, that can be tough. So you
Hmm.
can't, recall products. So you have to really think about your strategy there. But I think in short, think of bootstrap terms, and do your market search. What are the building blocks you need, and if they're open source and recommended for like say databases, if you need a backend database, or if you need an API gateway, it can be endless. Like all these components you need to build a platform, for example, then use them. Every penny you save initially is going to really count down the line. You don't want to
Yeah.
get into licensing at an early stage, and then have products that you're already paying so much for using enterprise grade databases when you don't need it initially. So might as well start with something quick, cheap, open source, bootstrap it, and test the product. And if it works, then in the next phase, launch a version one, which is going to be, more robust and maybe more relying on enterprise grade, backend, for example.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. That's quite interesting. Yeah. So this actually leads to another good segue of understanding, the organizational culture aspect and the engineering culture aspect, especially. So, is there any process or practice which you have developed and finding it very highly beneficial for you, which you want to share with the audience?
Ooh, I mean, I think I already mentioned it, but it's being an engineer. I'm always curious about problem solving, and there is if there is a problem, there must be a way to solve it. There might not be just one, but numerous ways to solve it, right? And I think everything that you approach, if there's a problem, like we knew that there's more insight we can get from the elderly, but we have to do it in a very clever way. Can we use sound? So and then when we think about using sound analysis, then we have to use machine learning in kilobytes, not in megabytes or gigabytes. We have to
Yeah.
shrink them down to tiny ML and all these techniques. So it's all about, I think, problem solving. There is numerous ways to do it. Have workshops with the team or with like-minded people who understand the problem and are there to help come up with different ways to think out of the box and come up with solutions. Because I think nowadays in tech, anything is kind of possible. It's just you just need to find the most
Yeah.
creative way to solve a small problem, and it should be a niche as well.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, right? So, what is your aha moment, Jeremy? If I talk about your entire journey, which you say, oh, now
Hmm.
that's something I did it, I made it kind of moment.
Wow. Yeah, it's a it's a funny question, but uh, I think the sound analysis part of things is very kind of like when I mentioned it to you, you were quite intrigued. I saw, and the same goes for anybody I speak to, because there's so many possibilities of it, and if you can come up with this with a tiny cheap solution for doing inferencing on the edge for identifying, say, 10 different things and be good at it. I think that is something that is really impressive, not just for me, but I think for anybody that we speak to. And I think it really involves a lot of effort because you don't have a lot of compute on edge. And there's a lot of connectivity issues, and there's a lot of issues like in terms of that. But trying to solve that, uh, and I think non-intrusively, and being able to kind of being able to uh, maybe in the future you can say that it may be able to help us identify dementia at an earlier age. It's a very, very big claim, but if we are able to even contribute a little bit, that will help in somebody's lifestyle, health, then I think I would be really kind of proud of it. So that will be quite exciting for everybody in the team as well.
Wow, wow, that's quite interesting. And now moving to a very interesting section of this podcast, which I found a lot of our audience, especially like this section. So, what is your war story? What is
Pardon?
the biggest what is your war story? What is the biggest challenge which you have overcome?
Oh, yes. I think right. I think I will not mention the financial because that's a part of every kind of startup and a co-founder's journey. But I think the biggest challenge is I will say it's not technical. It's more like identifying. Uh, Stop micromanaging because we are like all built to manage to some extent. And when you have like a baby that you're building, a product that you're building, and you've put a lot of sweat in it, then you always want to be very close to it and try to manage it too. But trying to delegate it to other people and get it, and trusting other people to manage something is kind of something I always dreaded doing, and I think it's come out really well when you kind of when you find the right people that you can trust, and they can assist you with your goals and the goals of the company. And stop kind of micromanaging stuff. I think this is still a trait that I'm kind of learning. And yeah, I hope that
Uh,
answers your question.
oh yeah, that's quite interesting. So now moving towards the last question, of this podcast. So, how do you stay up to date with latest trends in technology in the industry? And what do you think like the vital skills for anybody who's playing a technology leadership role in the current era?
Yeah, staying up to date is very, very important because if you don't, you may not know your competition. You may not know, if there are other opportunities there, if other companies are trying to do something very similar, if you have opportunities for partnerships. So, yeah, staying up to date is extremely important. But where do you go for staying up to date is very kind of a challenge because you have so many apps and so many kind of news. You have social media, so I myself personally am not very social media. On social media, I've kind of shied away from it for a very long time now. So I like communicating with individuals, and that is either in person or one to one is the kind of social media I do. So you will not find me on Twitter or other things, but you will find me on LinkedIn. So I use LinkedIn as quite a good channel to see what other people are doing, other companies are posting, and then obviously there is a general tech magazines, tech news that you can follow, but uh, I think because we are more in the kind of cloud and analytics and Kubernetes and all these, I think finding the best channels for those is quite important. And I think there's lots of if you have lots of questions about something, you can always nowadays you can connect to people on Slack and Discord and other channels, and then ask them directly as well. I think the main thing is also not just not absorbing everything, but also asking questions and challenging. I think that would be my if you would ask me if my advice would be to ask as many questions as possible, because if you
Yeah,
don't ask, to start a conversation, you can always start with a question, and that can lead to a very big conversation, maybe an idea for a product. But if you
yeah,
don't ask those conversations, it's sometimes there's no such thing as a stupid question as well. So when you're
yeah.
talking to anybody, even a tech or your your employees, then you should be free to ask questions, because knowledge is all about understanding something. How can you solve a problem when you don't understand the problem, right? So ask questions so you all understand what the issues are, and only then you can solve it. Otherwise, you can try numerous methods, but if you don't understand the problem well, you're going to end up in a wrong solution. So I always ask our team to ask as many questions, and I force them to ask questions. And it's funny. What I also do is we do a lot of teamwork exercise, because we have a diverse team in different places in Norway, in Canada, in London, and in Pakistan and India. So what we're trying to do is every other Monday we have our um, our stand up, but instead of the stand up, we take 1 hour and we randomly, a week before, 2 weeks before, we pick somebody new in the team to present on anything other than work, so that they can everybody can have a chance to speak out, and also the other team members can have conversations on some very interesting topics. So I think this is quite a good way for getting your team more active in not just work, but other real life, real day issues that the world could be facing. And everybody can contribute a little bit towards a new idea. But if you don't ask the questions, you will kind of left out.
Rightly said. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And that's quite interesting as well. One last question, Jeremy, and this is out of, curiosity and the benefit for my audience, as most of the audience are either technology leaders or they're aspiring for that. Uh, so as you talk about, brightest.ai, which seems to be quite interesting and beneficial, for these audience. How they can get explore this product? Is it like publicly available? They can go and access it and explore it. It's a
Yeah.
self exploration, or is there any other method for that?
Right. So at the moment we are final and we are closing the bootstrap. So it's not completely launched yet. We've done a soft launch in Norway in December last year. And basically, we are open for organizations who see the advantage of it to contact us directly, and we can go through a demo. So at the moment, it's still one-on-one demos we are doing, and what we're really looking for is, if somebody is happy to give it a go, then we would send them an invitation link, and where they can, complete the form and spin up their environment. And then what we call as an environment is basically a Kubernetes cluster that automatically spins up. And then all the kind of multi-tenancy stuff that you have in, say, Azure or other cloud providers. We've tried to do that very cleverly inside Stack ATS, and there are different terminologies there, so we can make them aware of it. But the main idea right now is to launch the bootstrap, which hopefully we will be there by the end of the month. And then we are ready to have either partners who could. Who've seen that this product could fit in the organization and help them solve the kind of the vendor lock-in issues, or using Kubernetes in a bit more easier way and removing all the complexities of microservices, then that's the right thing to do. And maybe they could help work with us as as partners, where we can integrate some more features that they seem missing, and then we can start working on those. And then in the future, then we will have like a more open to everyone. When we have kind of finalized those features with some very close organizations that we'll work on with. So, but feel free to get in touch with us directly on the website. You will have some links there, or you can email me directly, and we can have a conversation and a demo around this ambitious but exciting project.
Wow, wow, that's quite interesting. Wow. Great. So thank you so much, Jeremy. It's an amazing talking to you. There are a lot of great insights you have shared. I'm sure it must be very, very helpful for the audience who is listening this podcast. And to my audience, if you want to have a demonstration, you want to see how stack 8.ai works, you can just reach out to me or Jeremy on the LinkedIn, and we can get you right up there on the product itself. Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's amazing talking to you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye bye. Thank you.